Alrighty, man. That international always gets me going. Jesus, thank you so much for joining us, brother. How you doing?
Fine, fine. Thank you for inviting us, and it's an honor to be with you guys. We value your work. It's very important.
Likewise, Orinoco is one of my favorite places to keep up with the news. And if you're not following Orinoco, you're missing out. I don't know if you've been living under a rock or what, but make sure to check
Thank you.
out uh, Orinoco Tribune. Um, Brother, let's start with a question on to sort of contextualize the current events in the proper historical long term context. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Essequibo dispute and what role has imperialism played in creating it?
Yes, it's a complex question that I'm gonna try to summarize the best that I can. But basically, everything started with Venezuela's independence, and as we achieve our independence. mm, we inherited the territory, the map of the Captainy General of Venezuela, which was the Spanish colonial entity that controlled this part of the world, that belonged to the Nueva Granada viceroyalty. So basically, that map that we inherited from the Spanish. Um, Content Guyana, Essequibo, and many other territories that we have been losing over the years. And I have to recommend everyone to read two articles that our co-editor Sahili Chowdhury wrote. The names of those articles are Essequibo and Other Border Issues, Venezuela's Territorial Losses to Imperialist expansion. Those articles are on Orinoco Tribune and are great articles that explain. It, I mean, I haven't read anything better than that, even in Spanish. So she made a great job, explaining the whole historical context. But going back to the map, uh, that map stipulated that everything east of the Essequibo River belonged to Venezuela, and and the fact is that at some point by the end of the 19th century, when the British Empire was losing, yes, that's the first one. The second one is even better, because it goes deep into the current, Guyana, Essequibo territory dispute. But the British Empire began to expand into the region. I'm talking about east of the Essequibo, and the British got there because they managed to get that territory in a negotiation with the Netherlands, that they own what is called right now Suriname. But the Dutch gave the British that part of the Dutch Guyana, as it was called. And mm, basically what the British did was, while we were finishing our independence, and while we were fighting several civil wars that affected us almost half of the 19th century, the last half of the 19th century, the British began to take that territory because they wanted to take the delta of Orinoco, which is which gives access to several land within the continental mass of South America, and and uh, and of course because of gold and natural resources, and that region is plentiful of them. So by the end of the 19th century, the government of Cipriano Castro began to push hard to try to reach an agreement after several incidents with the British trying to get more territory from Venezuela. So, I mean, in 1899, sorry, the we finally managed to push for what is called the 1899 Paris Award that basically gave that territory to the British, and gave Venezuela some concessions. One of them, which is very important, is that Venezuela did not lose the access, the exit to the Atlantic Ocean through the Orinoco Delta. So, so Venezuela accepted that ruling, but a few decades later, by the end of, I believe that it was in 1949, one of the lawyers that was part of the Paris Arbitration Award, after his death, he left a will, and there was a letter called the Malais Prévost Memorandum, where he explained how the U.S. and the British hicieron una componenda, we say it in Spanish, created this fabrication of a word, by making us believe that, especially the US, because, I mean, basically what happened there is that Venezuela was not part of that negotiation because the British consider us that we were under civilized, as you know, white people usually see us up there in the north. So instead of Venezuela having representative in that negotiation in Paris in 1899, the U.S. was allegedly our representative. So they had two judges in that negotiation. There were two British judges, and there was another one that was a Russian one that was clearly biased towards the British. So anyway, the decision was fabricated, was agreed, just to solve the geostrategic interest and colonialist, imperialist interest of the U.S. and the U.K., and we did nothing. But when the Malais Prévost Memorandum, was unveiled, Venezuelan governments began to demand some, corrections, some rectification, and that happened in around in the 50s of the 20th century, and during the government of our last dictator, Pérez Jiménez. So with Pérez Jiménez, we began to push in international forums toward a revision of the Paris Award. So in 1966, we managed to, just a few months before the Guyana got independence from the British, we managed to sign the 1966 Geneva Agreement that stipulates that the conflict, the territorial dispute was, I mean, it first recognized that there was an issue with the Paris Award, because without that, they wouldn't, sign anyone would have signed the 1966 Geneva Agreement. So, and they stipulated that Venezuela and Guyana needed to resolve the issue in a certain period of time that was extendable, and that any decision should pass through the steps defined by the 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 peaceful resolution mechanism of the United Nations. So we in Venezuela agreed to that because that somehow make us, regain the possibility to negotiate that territory. But and for several years, the decision, and the policies of Venezuela around that issue were very, ¿cómo se dice? Erratics.
Erratic, yeah.
So what happened is that, to make the story short, is that by the beginning of the 20th century, oil corporations began to exploit to to explore the territory of Essequibo, Guyana, looking for oil, and they found oil, and in 2015, it was announced the discovery by ExxonMobil, the discovery of big oil, yacimientos, oil, locations in Guyana. And in 2016, the Secretary General of the United Nations decided to send the resolution of the dispute to the International Court of Justice without the consent of Venezuela, which is a how do you say that in English? Una violación, a violation of the Geneva Agreement, because everything in the Geneva Agreement refers to mutual agreement in everything that happened with the Essequibo territory. So since then, Guyana has been pushing towards that. Many people, of course, associate that to ExxonMobil and big U.S. oil corporations trying to get as much as possible from Guyana, and most recently, Guyana began to give oil concessions in even in waters that belong to Venezuela that are not part of the dispute, and any country have the right to do something about it. And we have been trying to exercise that right in the more democratic way that we have. And that's why we had a referendum a few days ago, last Sunday, where the majority of Venezuelans voted in favor of the questions that were, asked to us. So, and one of the most, uh, controversial questions in that referendum is the last one that refers to the creation of the Guyana Essequibo state. In that question, got about 95 or 96% of approval. So that gives you, and most of the questions were around that margin. So that gives you an idea of how galvanized the Venezuelan society is around, the discussion that goes beyond Chavismo and opposition and, all that, dilemma that we have been facing for several decades already in Venezuela. So that's basically what happened historically, very briefly, of course.
Thank you so much for that context. That's it's always mandatory for us as Marxists, as dialectical and historical materialists, to have that historical background in order to pass judgments on the things that we have in front of us today. Because what we have in front of us are facts, and if we don't understand the historical factors that gave the capacity of those facts to exist, we're not going to understand the facts except always one-sidedly. So it does seem like, as you mentioned, there's an intensification of this conflict pushed by U.S. imperialism, by ExxonMobil, especially after 2015 and the discovery of crude oil reserves in Essequibo. What do you think that what has that discovery played in the current intensification that we've had in the last few months, and how is ExxonMobil capable of influencing the Guyanese politics? What's the role of ExxonMobil in Guyanese politics?
Yes, I mean, basically, since 2015, the Guyanese government has been taking risky steps, giving concessions in waters that are part of the dispute, and but also, as I told you, most recently given concessions in areas that are completely Venezuelan waters out of the Essequibo dispute. So that gives you an idea of how complex the situation is. And ExxonMobil, the Venezuelan government has been showing documents where ExxonMobil is paying Guyana's legal fees in the International Court of Justice. We know from our experience as a country that leaving the resolution of territorial disputes to third parties is not the best solution. And that's why historically Venezuela has opposed, especially since the Paris arbitration of 1899, has opposed any participation of third parties in delimitation, in territorial delimitation. So that's a historical position on of Venezuela. And recently, for example, President Maduro says that last year, only in one of the biggest oil, you know, drills that they have there in Guyana, ExxonMobil makes something like $22 billion in oil sales, and the Guyanese government only got like 3 billion in royalties, which is like 1.5%. Uh, of course,
As
in Venezuela,
Alberto, Albert
yeah,
here says, Exxon grabs a massive 98% of Guyana's oil revenue, while Guyana is allowed a fiscal
exactly,
reward
and
for protect.
they are happy about it, because here in Venezuela would have to pay at least half in royalties. So that's of course what ExxonMobil is trying to exploit. They are trying to exploit the 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 lack of a strong government in Guyana, and maybe pro-imperialist government in Guyana. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in Guyana's politics, but I'm on the impression that at least this president Ilfan Ali is absolutely a sellout to U.S. interests and imperialism. So and but historically, Guyana accused us of being a leader imperial power in the region that wants to stall their land. But in reality, Venezuela never have sent soldiers outside our country, and the only time that we did that was in the independence war. So we are not a country that looks for war or is invading historically any country anywhere. So that's an exaggeration, and it's just a way of trying to invert the reality, which is that basically Guyana itself inherited this, imperialist legacy, and they are taking advantage of that in a very bad way, uh, because the issue, the territorial issue, is not only with Venezuela, it's also with Suriname. Suriname is also complaining about uh, uh, Guyana taking part of its territory also. So it's not, you know, what I said a few days ago in another interview is that Venezuela is not an aggressor state. In this particular moment, Guyana is the one that has been pushing hard to try to destabilize, and we as a country need to do something. It's not as Washington says that, or the mainstream media, that Maduro needs something to galvanize popularity and distract people's attention from the economic problems. The reality is that economic problems in Venezuela are getting better. I mean, are slowing down. I mean, the economy is getting better. So that argument is stupid. And also Chavismo, I mean, the support to Maduro is getting stronger because Maduro has been showing that he is able to deal with all the aggression from the US. So those arguments that you hear from the White House are nonsense. Even some of them talk about Maria Corina Machado, that the government is trying to do something to shadow the opposition primaries or something like that, which it is a fact that it was shadow because of the turnout numbers that they got in those primary elections, and how, by the way, Maria Corina Machado got overshadowed by these recent events, because her position on the Essequibo territory has been very zigzagging in recent weeks, at least.
Thank you so much for sharing that context. And it's interesting to hear that um, the comment that Venezuela somehow is acting as a colonial or imperialist power goes back to the Guyanese government. Because, the next question that I wanted to ask you is that I think a relatively I don't even want to say from what I've seen in some polls of some ultra leftist, fairly prominent figures in the U.S. left, um, the poll came out at like 60% of the people supporting Guyana, and I've seen a lot of these narratives spun that, similar to bourgeois ideology, they turn reality on its head. And one of them has been that, well, the Guyanese people weren't consulted. It's not democratic. Venezuela's acting as a
Yeah.
colonial power. etc., and it
Yes,
loses its whole historical context. It loses, the complexity that makes this an issue that is so clear to Venezuelans, not just Chavistas, because 95%, 95 to 96% of the people voted yes on every single question that was asked. So, what would you reply to these folks, perhaps in the ultra left, perhaps confused comrades who are taking Guyana's side here instead of Venezuela's?
I will ask them to really dig deep into history, first of all, and don't take for granted the narrative that you hear in mainstream media. You dig a little bit into history and you will find more information. Wikipedia is also a no go source, so don't trust Wikipedia neither. But I mean, what they are saying that, for example, the Guyanese people has not been consulting about this latest decision of Venezuela. How can we do that? I mean, how can we make operational consulting the Guyanese people? I mean, the idea after the referendum is to galvanize Venezuelans' position, sovereignty over that territory, and that will lead us to have a more active and proactive approach towards the peoples living in that area. And that's what I expect to happen. Actually, President Maduro just announced a few minutes ago that he was sending today to the National Assembly the law for the creation of the Guayana Essequibo state. And it's important to highlight because there's people are playing with terms and they are using annexation instead of incorporation. I mean, there are several articles that I have read when they talk about annexation. Venezuela is not talking about annexing the territory by force. Venezuela is talking about incorporating that territory in a symbolic way, if you ask me, uh, uh, to try to initiate a process to exercise sovereignty and to make our claims more strong over that territory. So President Maduro sent that law to the National Assembly, and I'm sure the National Assembly will approve that law. And there are other several, arguments that I have read in articles and opinion pieces out there from leftists or liberal or ultra leftist people. But I have the impression that those are people that are just trying to create confusion.
Mm,
Maybe I'm wrong, but those are opportunistic people. Most of them. I'm not saying that everyone, but the articles that I have read, from my perspectives, are very opportunistic and trying to create confusion instead of clarifying. Giving information, providing facts. The same
thank you
thing
so
with
much.
the same thing with they are talking about skirmishes in the border with the army. That's fake news. That's not happening.
Mm,
You know, Venezuela is not planning. No one in Venezuela is talking about invading,
yeah,
military invading the territory. No one here is talking about that. But I hear that a lot from abroad, and that's worrisome because you know that maybe they are just creating the environment for something like that to happen.
right.
So that's something that I ask people to, especially you that are outside Venezuela, to try to clarify, because it's
Mhm.
not true. No one in Venezuela is talking about military action. Of course, there aggressive military actions I'm talking about. Of course, the government has been making some statements about some announcement about some military, sovereignty exercises near the border, like the construction of a school or a strip for airplanes or something like that. But beyond that, nothing else has happened in the border, militarily talking. So I believe that it's important to clarify that.
Absolutely, I think you're absolutely right. Um, we have a couple minutes left. Our next guest is here, but I wanted to ask perhaps a dangerous question. Anytime we're asked to predict, it's always there's always the danger
Yes,
of being
I'm in
terribly wrong.
Venezuela.
I know I've experienced that, where I make a prediction and the complete opposite happens. But I want to end with a sort of combination of the super chat that we got here from Comrade Red Maiz. Thank you for the $10 super chat, Comrade. This is a grassroots, people's funded institute, so this is foundational to the work that we do here at the Midwestern Marx Institute. Is this Comrade from Venezuela? Yes. Jesus is speaking to us out of Venezuela. Sending love from the U.S., comrades. What is his opinion on
Yeah.
Castillo getting locked up? Does Venezuela get his seat in BRICS if Argentina pulls out? Maybe you can address, where the Venezuelan standing with BRICS is real quick, and as a part of that, point us to where you see this question of the Essequibo unfolding into in the future. And if you could somehow keep that under a few minutes, 3-4 minutes, that would
That's
be
fine.
difficult, but appreciated. Thank you.
That's fine. I mean, just going to the questions. I mean, Venezuela always have been criticizing the coup d'état of Dina Castillo against Pedro Castillo. But of course, I mean, there are diplomatic dynamics that, sometimes make things a little bit milder when you're talking about diplomatic relations between countries. So we have diplomatic relations with that government, sadly. Uh, uh, but we hope that, but that doesn't mean that the Venezuelan government haven't have a solid stand against what happened with Pedro Castillo, that is in jail for more than a year. So, what was the other part of the question? Of his question that I forgot?
If, since Argentina
And
renounced its
BRICS. Okay,
entry,
yes. I mean, a lot of people has been writing about if Argentina, Miley's Argentina, is not joining BRICS. Maybe BRICS should allow Venezuela to become a new BRIC member. And I believe that argument is nice. I mean, it's good. So I hope that people in BRICS take that into consideration, and maybe we eventually become a BRICS country. That will be great for us. But I believe
yeah,
there's a competition of countries, trying to get there. And going
yeah,
to your question, to trying to elaborate on how what I see is going to happen in a positive scenario without any distortions from outside, the ones that I just mentioned. Uh, I would love Venezuela state to do what I believe is going to happen. I mean, to exercise sovereignty in the border with Venezuela, to populate that area that is very unpopulated, uh, to build roads, improve infrastructure, create telecommunication networks that send messages to the people of Guyana. Uh, um, to provide the Guyanese people, as the question in the referendum, state services and Venezuelan citizenship. If they want, we are not going to force them to do that. I mean, it's just an initiative by the Venezuelan state to try to exercise sovereignty towards that territory, and I believe that's something that we, ¿cómo se dice en español? Que debimos haber hecho hace tiempo. That we
we should have done it a while ago. We should have.
Exactly. So I hope that that's what happened, and that will put us in a better negotiation position with the Guyanese people that have control over that territory, and that we cannot get there. I mean that's a territory that is controlled by Guyana, and always has been like that, at least since 1899. So that's basically what I hope is going to happen. I'm trying to be sure to avoid, getting into your other panelists' time.
Well, thank you so much, brother. It's been incredibly insightful. I think you have given us the context and the history that allows us to understand this event with much more profundity with than what's being currently discussed about it in the mainstream media and in parts of the alternative left wing media in the U.S. Thank you so much for coming on. We're gonna have
Thank
to
you
have you
for the
back on soon.
invitation.
And please, everyone listening to this, go check out Orinoco Tribune, one of my favorite sites for all things Latin America and geopolitics.
Un abrazo, Carlos.
Un abrazo.